Hey there. Thank you guys so much for stopping by my channel, The Magical Solution. We are live here tonight on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitch, and in my private Facebook group, The Magical Solution, This Is How We Grow. So we are continuing on with our book tonight, The Medium's Book by Allan Kardec. We are on chapter 6 tonight. And I said to myself, I'm feeling myself. I got my hair, I got my makeup done. I just got finished doing an awesome interview with my two favorite people, John Michael and Dominic, on their podcast, which is the Brew Podcast, Spirituality and Culture. Now, if you guys want to check out that discussion, we talked about Afro-Latinx magic and the intersectionality with social justice. If you want to check that out, the replay can be found Friday on YouTube at the Brew Podcast YouTube channel. But if you just can't wait and you need to watch it right now at this very instant, you can join the private Facebook group of John Michael. And that private Facebook group is called The Brew, Spirituality and Culture. And you can watch the replay right now. But please don't, because I want to do this book and I want you to hang out with me for that, okay? So let's get to it. We're on chapter 6 today. And the title of this chapter is Visual Manifestations of Spirits, okay? And the subcategories that we'll be covering in this chapter are questions concerning these apparitions, theoretical essays on apparitions, globular spirits, and hallucination theory, okay? So let's get to it. Questions concerning apparitions. Of all the spirit manifestations, the most interesting are undoubtedly those in which spirits can render themselves visible. From an examination of this type of phenomenon, we will see that, like all the others, there is nothing at all supernatural about it. First, we will provide responses by the spirits on the subject. Number 1, here's the question. Can spirits render themselves visible? The answer? Yes, especially during sleep. However, certain individuals can also see them while they're awake, although this is less frequent. Now, while the body rests, the spirit loosens the material ties, becomes freer, and can more easily see other spirits and communicate with them. A dream is only a recollection of this state, and when we remember nothing, we say that we have not dreamt at all. But the soul has nevertheless seen and enjoyed its liberty. Here, we are dealing more particularly with apparitions that occur during the waking state. So question number 2. Do spirits who visibly manifest themselves belong more to one specific category than another? No. They can all belong to all the categories, the highest all the way down to the lowest categories. Question number 3. Are all spirits permitted to manifest themselves visibly? All may do so, but they do not always receive permission or even desire to do so. Question number 4. For what purpose do they manifest themselves visibly? Well, it depends on their nature. Their purpose may either be good or evil. Question number 5. Why would they be permitted if their purpose is evil? It would be allowed to test those to whom they appear. Thus, the spirit's intention may be evil, but the result may be good. Question number 6. What is the purpose of spirits who render themselves visible with evil intentions? They appear out of a desire to frighten and often out of revenge. So, what is the purpose of spirits who appear with good intentions? To console those who are mourning their departure in order to prove to them that they continue to exist and are close by. They might also appear to give advice and sometimes to ask for assistance for themselves. Question number 7. What harm would there be if the possibility of seeing spirits were permanent and widespread among human beings, wouldn't that be a way to remove all doubt from the minds of disbelievers? Well, since human beings are constantly surrounded by spirits, it would be troublesome and would hamper them in their daily activities if they could see spirits all the time. It would also, in most cases, take away their initiative. While on the other hand, if they believe that they are alone, they will act more freely. As for disbelievers, there are many other means available for them to be convinced if they would take advantage of them and if they were not blinded by pride. You are well aware that there are people who have seen but do not believe nonetheless because they say that they have experienced an illusion. Do not concern yourself about such people. God is responsible for them. It would be very inconvenient if we were able to see spirits about us all the time. It would be like seeing the air that surrounds us or the myriad of microscopic animals that swarm all around us. From this, we must conclude that what God has done is well done and that God knows better than we do for the best of us. Question number 8. If being able to see spirits might be inconvenient, why is it permitted in certain cases? To provide proof that everything does not end with the death of the body and that the soul retains its individuality after death. This temporary glimpse is enough to provide such proof and to attest the presence of your friends at your side, but it is not as inconvenient as being able to see them all the time would be. Question number 9. On more highly evolved worlds than our own, are spirits seen more frequently? The more humans approach their spirit nature, the easier it becomes for them to communicate with spirits. It is because your bodies are so dense that it is rarer and more difficult to perceive ethereal beings. I want you to pay really close attention to that line. The closer, the more that humans approach their spiritual nature, the more that they will have spiritual interactions with entities, spirits, angels, whatever. Because when you start to purify yourself, you become more of an open channel. Those people who are stuck in a space of doubt, disbelief, and are kind of stuck and rendered by their own base emotions will they just won't have those kinds of experiences. And if they do, they'll be very rare. And in those cases, they'll still probably disbelieve them. Question 10. Is it reasonable to be frightened at the apparition of a spirit? Well, anyone who reflects on the matter will understand that a spirit, whatever it may appear as, is less dangerous than a living person. Moreover, spirits go everywhere, and you do not have to see them in order to know that they are at your side. A spirit who desires to harm someone can do so more surely without being seen. A spirit is not dangerous because it is a spirit, but because of the influence it can exert upon a person's thoughts, drawing him or her away from the good and pushing him or her towards evil. People who are afraid of the dark and of being alone rarely comprehend the cause of their fear. They would not know what to say if asked what they are afraid of, but they should certainly be more afraid of meeting other human beings than spirits because evildoers are more dangerous when alive than after death. A lady whom we know, saw an apparition one night in her room. It was so well defined that she believed that there was actually someone present. Her first sensation was terror. However, upon assuring herself that there was no one else, she said to herself, "It looks like it was only a spirit, so I can sleep in peace." Question number 11. Can anyone who sees a spirit also talk to it? Certainly. And that is exactly what should be done in such a case. Ask the spirit who it is, what it wants, and what can be done for it. If it is unhappy and suffering, Showing sympathy will bring it relief. If it is a benevolent spirit, it may intend to offer good advice. In such cases, how will the spirit respond? Sometimes they are articulating sounds like a living person would, but usually by transmitting its thoughts. Question number 12. Do spirits who appear to have wings really have them, or are they only symbolic in appearance? Spirits do not have wings. They do not need them, since as spirits they can go anywhere. But they appear in this form in order to impress the person to whom they show themselves. Some appear wearing their normal clothing, others in drapery, and some with wings. A characterization of the spiritual category they are representing. Question 13. Are the persons we see while dreaming always who they appear to be? They are almost always the same ones. Your spirit goes to meet them, or they come to meet you. Question 14. Couldn't deceptive spirits take on the appearance of someone dear to us in order to mislead us? They take on fantastic appearances only in order to have fun at your experience. But there are matters that they are not allowed to play with. Question 15. Since thought is a kind of evocation, we can understand that it can induce a spirit to appear. But why is it that the persons whom we think about the most and whom we most ardently desire to see again almost never appear to us in our dreams, while we often see others who do not interest us in the least and whom we never think about? It's not always possible for spirits to show themselves visibly, even in dreams, and in spite of your desire to see them, because causes apart from their will may prevent them. Besides, it is almost always a trial, which even your most ardent desire cannot avert. As for individuals who do not interest you, it is possible that they are thinking of you, even though you are not thinking of them. Moreover, you have no idea about relationships in the spirit world, where you might meet up with a multitude of close and old and new acquaintances whom you have no memory of at all while awake. When there is no means of verifying visions or apparitions, we can almost certainly treat them as belonging only to hallucinations. However, when they are confirmed by the circumstances, we cannot attribute them to our imagination. Such are, for example, apparitions at the time of death, while asleep or awake, involving persons whom we had not been thinking about and who by various signs have come to reveal the absolutely unexpected circumstances of their passing. In such instances, we have seen horses rear up and balk before apparitions that frighten their riders. Imagination may be something that humans are endowed with, but the same cannot be said for animals. Moreover, if the images we see while dreaming are always the result of our waking concerns, that would not explain why we hardly ever dream of the matters that we have been thinking about the most. Question 16. Why do certain visions happen more frequently during illness? They happen just as frequently in the state of perfect health. But during illness, the material ties loosen and the weakness of the body allows more freedom to the spirit, which then more easily communicates with other spirits. If that is not the truth, how many of y'all have been bedridden from like the flu or like or if you've had COVID and you're just like lying in bed, just like all fucked up, just in and out of sleep, just leaking from the face, just sick as all hell, and that's when you get the most vivid dreams, the most like traumatic dreams, like the most crazy like stuff happening in your head, right? Oh, if that's not the truth. Question 17. Spontaneous apparitions seem to occur more often in certain countries. Are the members of some cultures more gifted than others at receiving these manifestations? So, like talking about things like, for example, in Mexico with like La Fatima, right? Um, in different parts of the world, they'll have like these group quote unquote hallucinations or these group visions of particular deities. The answer: have you made a historical registration of every apparition? Apparitions, noises, and all other manifestations occur equally all over the world, but they display their own particular characteristics according to the cultures among which they occur. For example, among those where writing is not very widespread, there are no writing mediums. Among others, they abound. Also, among the former manifestations involving noises and movements of objects are more frequent than intelligent communications, which are less appreciated and sought after. Question 18. So, why do apparitions occur more at night? Like, mightn't this show that they are the effect of silence and darkness upon one's imagination? For the same reason you see the stars at night and not in full daylight? Intense lighting can eclipse a delicate apparition. Nevertheless, it is wrong to suppose that night has something special about it in that regard. Question those who have seen apparitions, and you will find that most have actually occurred during the day. The phenomenon of apparitions are much more frequent and common than one might think, but many persons do not reveal them either because they fear being ridiculed or because they attribute them to illusion. If they seem to occur more abundantly among certain cultures, it is because such cultures have more carefully preserved their correct or erroneous traditions, which are almost always exaggerated by a fascination for the extraordinary in areas that are more or less disposed to them. Furthermore, credulity sees supernatural effects in the most ordinary phenomenon. The silence of solitude, the steep slope of ravenous, the rustle of trees, the roar of storms, the echo from mountains, the fantastic shapes of clouds, shadows, and mirages. Anything can lend itself to deluding simple and naively imaginative people who recount in good faith what they have seen or believe they have seen. However, alongside fiction, there is reality, and a serious study of Spiritism can set people free from the foolish accessories of superstition. Question 19. Does the seeing of spirits occur in the normal state or only during ecstasy? It can occur under perfect normal conditions. However, those who see them are almost always in a special state, which approaches ecstasy and which gives them a kind of second sight. And you can find more about this in the Spirits book on page 447. Question 20. Do those who see spirits do so with their eyes? They think they do, but in reality, it is their soul that sees them. This is proven by the fact that they can still see them with their eyes closed. Question 21. How can a spirit render itself visible? The principle is the same for all other manifestations. It resides in the properties of the perispirit, which can undergo as many modifications as the spirit sees fit. So, again, to understand what the word perispirit means, please go back to the Spirits book on my YouTube channel, and it goes into great detail about what the perispirit is. Question 22. Can a spirit per se make itself visible, or can it only do so with the aid of the perispirit? In your material state, spirits can only manifest themselves with the aid of the semi material envelope, which is the intermediary through which they act upon your senses. Under this envelope, they can appear in human form or any other, whether in dreams or in waking state, whether in full light or in darkness. Question 23. Could we say that it is through a condensation of the perispirit's fluid that the spirit makes itself visible? Condensation is not the right word. It only serves to make a comparison that can help you understand the phenomenon. While in reality, there is no actual condensation. The combining of fluids produces a special condition in the perispirit, which has no analogy for you, but which renders the spirit visible nonetheless. Question 24. Are the spirits who appear always intangible and inaccessible? In their normal state, they are intangible, like a dream. Nevertheless, they can make an impression upon your sense of touch and leave signs of their presence. In some cases, they can even render themselves tangible for a moment, which proves the existence of some kind of matter between them and you. Question 25. Is everyone capable of seeing spirits? During sleep, yes, but not while awake. During sleep, the soul sees directly without any intermediary. While you are awake, the soul is influenced by the organs to different degrees. Thus, the conditions are not the same in the two instances. So, this is really important because, you know, in this age where everyone wants to be a medium, um, mediumship requires you to be able to experience these spirits in broad daylight, in waking life, and not just in your dreams. And that has a huge impact, and your physical body has a huge impact on your ability to do that. I say this all the time with people in my classes about spiritual hygiene, right? That we as vessels can only each of us has a very different capacity for energy, right? We can we our conduit body can only handle so much energy at any given time, and that handling of energy is solely based on how well we take care of our body. So if you're abusing your body, if your diet is fucked up, if your breath and your lungs and everything is all fucked up, and you're not engaging in good spiritual hygiene, then your body is not an efficient conduit of the energy, and it makes it much more difficult for you to do these kinds of practices. That's not to say you can't do them, but in comparison to the next person who's got all their shit on lock, it's definitely a different capacity. It's definitely a different experience for you. Okay. What does the faculty for seeing spirits in the waking state depend on? The answer: it depends on the organism and the greater or lesser ease with which the fluid of the seer combines with that of the spirit. Hence, it is not enough for the spirit simply to want to show itself. The spirit must find the required aptitude in the individual to whom it wants to show itself, right? So, spirits, so it's not just about a spirit communicating through a medium, or any medium. It's about a spirit communicating with a medium whose whose organism, whose body is strong enough to allow these spiritual fluids to create this manifestation and allow this manifestation to occur. You know, can this faculty be developed through practice? It can be at it can be as can all other faculties. However, it is a faculty that is better left to develop naturally rather than artificially, because in the later case, there is a risk of overexciting the imagination. And common and permanent ability to see spirits is exceptional, and normal human conditions are not conducive to it. So, a piece of this also too is it's kind of like a battery, right? So like you can charge up a battery, but the battery can only hold that charge for so long. because the minute you charge that battery, if you're not already using it for stuff, if you just leave that battery out and don't ever use it, it will still leak out energy. And that leaking out of energy causes it to lose its charge. So that when you are ready to use that battery, there's not much left. You have to recharge it. So it's kind of that same concept. You know what I mean? This idea of, of being a medium and interacting with spirits and working with manipulating energy, to do that consistently all the time, all day, every day, night and day, is virtually impossible, because you would have to be constantly charging yourself to be able to allow that energy to flow through you. And not only that, but you can burn out, because again, you can only hold so much for only so much time before it starts to affect you and your health. Question 27. Can spirit apparitions be artificially induced? Sometimes it is possible, but very rarely. They're almost always spontaneous. For someone to see spirits, they must be endowed with a special faculty. Question 28. Can spirits render themselves visible in other forms besides the human one? Well, the human one is the normal one. A spirit can vary its appearance, but it's nearly always retains its human form. Can they appear in the form of a flame? They can produce flames of light as well as any other effect to demonstrate their presence, but such attributes are not of the spirits themselves. A flame is usually an optical effect or an emanation of the perispirit. In every case, it is only a part of the perispirit, which only appears in its entirety during vision. Question 29. What are we to think of the belief that attributes will o' the wisps to souls or spirits? Superstition resulting from ignorance. The physical cause of will-o'-wisps is well known. Well, was the blue flame that appeared over the head of Servius Tullius while he was an infant real or only a legend? It was real, produced by the familiar spirit who wanted to warn his mother because she was a seeing medium. She saw the radiation of her son's protector spirit. Seeing mediums vary in their degree of perception, just as writing mediums vary in their ability to write. While this mother saw only a flame, another medium might have seen the spirit itself. Hmm. Question 30. Can spirits show themselves in the form of an animal? And I apologize for eating. I have not eaten all day, so I'm just kind of snacking while we talk. Can the spirits show themselves in the form of an animal? That can happen, but low order spirits are always the ones who take on such appearances. In every case, however, it is a temporary appearance, because it would be absurd to believe that an animal could be the incarnation of a spirit. Animals are always animals and nothing more. Only sheer superstition could lead to the belief that certain animals are incarnations of spirits. One would have to have a very complacent or impressionable imagination to see something supernatural in the somewhat bizarre circumstances in which animals sometimes present themselves. Fear often causes one to see something that does not really exist. Nonetheless, fear is not always the source of this idea. We knew a lady who was in fact quite intelligent, who was extremely fond of a certain black cat because she believed that it possessed a super animal nature. However, she had never heard mentioned of spiritism. If she had been familiar with it, she would have understood how foolish her predicament was, since the doctrine would have disclosed the impossibility of such a metamorphosis. Now, again, these books are considered like the doctrines of spiritism, but they're not always perfect. And this, in one area, is where I disagree with Allan Kardec and have seen experiences of my own that prove that this is not accurate. That that oftentimes spirits, especially spirits of higher orders, will manifest themselves as animals and protector spirits in animal form for their people. Um, but again, that's to each their own, right? So now we are on the next part of chapter 6, and that is called the theoretical essays on these apparitions. So it's basically just a whole run through. The most common manifestations of apparitions occur in dreams during sleep. These are visions. We cannot here examine all the particularities that dreams can present, but we will sum them up by stating that they may be an actual vision of present or absent things, a retrospective vision of the past, in certain exceptional cases, a presentiment of the future. Frequently, they are also allegorical images that good spirits present to us as useful warnings or beneficial advice. If they are imperfect spirits, they may use them to mislead us and encourage our passions. The theory that follows below is applicable to dreams and all other cases of apparitions. We shall not offend our readers' common sense if we refute the absurd and foolish notions of what is entitled in popular dream interpretation. Apparitions per se occur during the waking state when the individual is in full enjoyment and has the complete freedom of his or her faculties. They generally appear in a vaporous and diaphanous form, and that is sometimes vague and indistinct. When they first appear, they are almost always a whitish light, whose contours gradually become more definite. At other times, their forms are clearly accentuated, and the minutest traces of the face can be distinguished to such a degree that it can be precisely described. Their appearance and other characteristics are similar to those of the spirit when it is incarnate. Since a spirit can assume any appearance, it presents itself with the one by which it can best be identified, if that is what it wants. Thus, even though it has no actual corporal handicap as a spirit, it may appear to be maimed, lame, humpback, wounded, or scarred if that is what is needed to identify it. For example, Aesop is not deformed as a spirit, but if we would evoke him, he would appear ugly and humpbacked, wearing his traditional garb, no matter how many lives he has lived in the meantime. One particularity worth noting is that, except in special circumstances, the least precise components of an apparition are the lower limbs, while the head and torso and arms and hands appear clearly. Hence, we almost never see them walk. They glide like shadows. As for their garments, they are usually comprised of a sort of drapery that ends in long flowing folds. Spirits who have retained nothing of their earthly life appear with flowing and graceful hair, but the ordinary spirits of individuals with whom we are familiar usually dress as they did during the final days of their existence. Quite often, they display attributes that are characteristic of their elevation, such as a halo or wings, leading them to be regarded as angels. Others carry symbols that remind us of their earthly activities. A warrior might appear in armor, a scholar with books, an assassin with a dagger, and so on. Highly evolved spirits display a beautiful, noble, and serene figure, whereas the least evolved spirits have something ferocious and bestial about them, sometimes still bearing vestiges of the crimes they committed or the tortures that they suffered. The issue of clothing and accessories is perhaps the most intriguing. We shall return to this discussion in a special chapter because it is connected with other very important issues. We have stated that the apparitions have something vaporous about them. In some cases, we could compare them to the image reflected in an unsilvered mirror, where, despite its clearness, we may also see objects that are behind the mirror. This is how seeing mediums usually perceive them. They see them come and go, enter a room or leave, circulate amongst a crowd of living persons, at least when it comes to ordinary spirits who take an interest in everything, listen to everything that is said, and take an active part in all that goes around them. Good spirits are often seen to approach individuals in order to whisper ideas to them, to influence and comfort them, while evil spirits do so in order to mock them and to show disappointment or satisfaction as the result. In other words, spirits are the counterparts of the corporal world. Thus, is that secret world surrounding us, in the midst of which we live without even suspecting it, just as we live among the myriad beings of the microscopic world. The microscopic has revealed the infinitely tiny world which we never suspected to exist. Spiritism, with the help of seeing mediums, has revealed the spirit world to us, which is also one of the active forces of nature. With the aid of such seeing mediums, we have been able to study the invisible world and to be initiated into its customs in the same way that a culture of blind individuals would be able to study the visible world with the help of sighted persons. A spirit who so desires and who is actually able to appear sometimes assumes an even more defined form with all the appearances of a solid body to the point of displaying a perfect illusion and leading us to believe that we are dealing with an actual corporal being. In some cases and under certain circumstances, an apparition's tangibility can become real, meaning that we can touch and handle it and feel its resistance and heat as if it were a living body. Nevertheless, such characteristics do not prevent the apparition from vanishing as quickly as a flash of lightning. In these cases, its presence is not only verified with the eyes, but with the touch as well. If we could attribute the occurrence of a simple visual apparition to illusion or a kind of delusion, there could be no more doubt when we can hold and feel it. And when it can hold and hug us, however, tangible apparitions are the rarest. Nevertheless, those which have appeared of late under the influence of a few powerful mediums, and which have been completely authenticated by blameless witnesses, prove and explain the historical records involving persons who have reappeared after death with all the appearances of reality. Moreover, we have already pointed out, in spite of how extraordinary such phenomena might seem, they lose all their extraordinary characteristics when we know about the way in which they are produced and when we understand that, far from representing a degradation from natural laws, they only display a new application to them. By its very nature and in its normal state, the perispirit is invisible. The same way the same may be said of countless fluids that we know to exist, but which have never been seen. But like certain fluids, it can undergo modifications that render it visible, whether by a sort of condensation or by a change in its molecular arrangement. This is when it can appear to us in a vaporous form. Condensation, we must not take this word literally. We only use it due to the lack of another and a simple instrument of comparison. Okay? Can be such that the perispirit acquires the properties of a solid and tangible body, but it can instantaneously return to its ethereal and invisible state. We can understand this process by comparing it to a steam, which can go from invisibility to a mist, then to a liquid, and finally to a solid, and vice versa. These diverse states of the perispirit, however, are due to the will of the spirit itself and not to physical or outside causes, as is the case with our gases. A spirit can appear to us with when it places its perispirit in the state necessary to become visible, but a simple desire is not enough to produce the effect because the modification of the perispirit can only occur when it combines its own fluids with the specific fluid of the medium. This combining is not always possible, which explains why it is uncommon for spirits to make themselves visible. Consequently, it is not enough for the spirit to want to appear for a person to want to see it. The combining of the fluids of both is required, which means that there must be a kind of affinity between them. And also that the emission of the medium's fluid must be quite abundant in order to bring about the perispirit's transformation. There are probably other conditions that we do not yet know about. And finally, the spirit must have received permission to appear to a person, which is not always granted. And if so, only in certain circumstances for reasons that we are not yet able to ascertain. Another property of the perispirit is the penetrability inherent in its ethereal nature. No type of matter can obstruct it. It can pass through anything as easily as light passes through transparent objects. Hence, there are no means of preventing spirits from entering a place. They can visit prisoners in their cells as easily as they can visit someone in the middle of an open field. Apparitions during the waking state are not rare, nor do they comprise of a novelty. They have occurred throughout history, which offers us a large number of such cases. However, without having to resort to the past, they have frequently been encountered in our own times. Many people have seen them and have at first taken them for what convention has called hallucinations. They are especially common in cases where persons have died somewhere far away and have come to visit relatives and friends. They often do not have a clear objective, but we can state that spirits who appear in this way are generally drawn to do so out of sympathy. If we would examine our memories, we would find that there are few people who have not heard of incidents of this kind, and their authenticity can no longer be held in doubt. We're now on the part of the chapter called Globular Spirits. Okay, we're almost done with this chapter. To the foregoing considerations, we shall add an examination of certain optical effects that have given rise to the strange theory of globular spirits. Often, the air is not entirely clean, and at such times, the currents of aeriform molecules and their heat produce movement can become perfectly visible. Some people have actually taken this phenomenon to be masses of spirits fluttering around in the air. It is enough only to mention this theory in order to refute it. Nonetheless, there is another kind of illusion that is no less bizarre and against which we must also be on guard. The watery fluid in the eye sometimes contains specks that are barely perceptible and which have lost some of their transparency. And these specks are like opaque objects suspended in fluid, whose movement they follow. They appear as tiny discs, barely 1/16 of an inch in diameter, but augmented by refraction. They appear to float in the air some distance away. We have seen people take these discs to be spirits who follow them everywhere, and in their enthusiasm they see figures and the nuances of the iridescence. This is about as rational as seeing the figure of a man on the moon. It would only take a simple observation on their part to bring themselves back to reality. They say that these discs or medallions not only follow them, but that also duplicate they also duplicate their movements. They go to the right and to the left and up and down or stop according to their head movements. There's nothing strange about this, since the seat of the phenomenon lies in the ocular globe, must naturally obey its movements. If they were actually spirits, people would have to admit that the discs display a too highly mechanical movement for intelligent and free beings, a tiresome role even for low order spirits, and a role even more incompatible with our ideas concerning high order spirits. Some people have even taken the black or opaque specks that sometimes appear in the eye to be evil spirits. Oh, both the discs and the black specks have a wave-like movement that is restricted to a certain angle. And what increases the illusion
is that they do not abruptly follow the movements of the line of vision. The reason is simple. The opaque specks in the watery fluid, the primary cause of this phenomenon, are, as we have stated, suspended in the liquid and tend to float downwards. When they rise, they do so with the movement of the eyes from the bottom upwards. When they reach a certain height, they become fixed, and they are seen to float back down, stopped by themselves. They are extremely mobile because it only takes an imperceptible movement of the eye to make them change direction and quickly travel the whole width of the arc in the space where the image is produced. As long as it has not been proven that the image has its own spontaneous and intelligent movement, one can only see it as an optical and physiological phenomenon. The same thing happens with the stars. Sometimes produced by the contraction of the eye muscles, which appear in more or less tight bunches. These are probably due to the phosphorescent electricity of the iris because they are usually confined to the circle part of the eye. Similar types of these illusions can only be the result of imperfect observation. Whoever has seriously studied the nature of spirits through the means offered by practical spiritism will understand how naive they are. Just as we combat the hardy theories that attack spirit communications when such theories are based on an ignorance of facts, we must also seek to destroy the erroneous ideas that result from more enthusiasm than mental reflection, and which therefore cause more harm than good to disbelievers who are already naturally disposed to looking for the ridiculous side of this matter. As we have seen, the Peri spirit is the principle for all manifestations. Understanding it has given us the key to numerous phenomena. It has led to a large advance in spiritual science and has enabled it to enter upon a new path by removing any relic of the miraculous from it. Thanks to the spirits themselves, we must always point out that it was they who taught us the way. We have found in the Peri spirit an explanation for spirits, action upon matter, the moving about of inert objects, noises, apparitions. In the Peri spirit, we find an explanation for many other phenomena yet to be examined before proceeding to a study of the communications per se. We will understand these communications much better the more completely we understand their fundamental causes. If we understand this principle, it will be easier for us to apply it to the various phenomena that may present themselves for observation. However, far be it from us to regard the theory that we are presenting as absolute and as being the last word on the issue. It will undoubtedly be completed or corrected later on through new studies, but no matter how incomplete or imperfect it may be, at present, it can always help if we understand the possibility of the phenomenon resulting from causes that have nothing supernatural about them. If it is a theory, we nevertheless cannot deny the merit of its reasonableness and probability, and that is worth as much as all the explanations that our detractors have attempted to use in order to prove that everything involving spirit phenomenon is no more than an illusion. So that particular little chapter, that particular little piece of the chapter, he was basically talking about the little optical illusions that we get, the little floaties that we get in the eyes. Um, you can see them really well on like cloudy, gray, rainy days. You can see them really well if you get punched in the head really hard. You can see them really well when you kind of unfocus your eyes a little bit. Um, and he was using that as an explanation, as a way to say, like, look, these are also some things that people love to say, oh, it's a spirit. But we got to look at it closely. And he kind of broke it apart as to how these little globular things, like how they move, why they move, the relationship to their movement and to the movement of our head, all that stuff. He was able to break down and deduce that it's not a spirit. Whereas when he talks about the Peri spirit, when he talks about the visions and the way that the mediums describe these spirits, they're unquestionable in that sense. Okay, we are now on the final part of this chapter called the hallucination theory. It's the last 2 pages. and then we will finish. So, the hallucination theory. Those who do not accept the existence of the incorporeal and invisible world think that they can explain everything away with the word hallucination. The definition of this word is well known. It means the error, the illusion of those who believe they experience certain perceptions when in fact they do not. It comes from the Latin hallucinare, to err, from ad illusum. But we know that scholars still have not explained its physiological cause. Since it seems that optics and physiology no longer hold any secrets from these learned individuals, why haven't they been able to explain the nature and origin of such images that are shown to the spirit under certain circumstances? They want to explain everything using the laws of matter and should therefore be able to provide a theory of hallucination based upon such laws. Good or bad, it would at least be an explanation. The cause of dreams has never been explained by science. It attributes them to the effect of the imagination, but it does not tell us what this imagination is or how it produces the images that are so clear and distinct, which at times appears to us. Thus, they explain one unknown thing with another that is even less known. Everything remains the same. They say that dreams should be regarded as a memory of our waking state concerns. However, even if we were to accept this solution, it would actually resolve nothing. We would still need to know what this magic mirror is that retains the impression of such concerns. Above all, how can they explain the visions of real things that we have never seen before or thought of in our waking state? Only Spiritism can provide us with the key to those strange phenomena that passed unnoticed simply because they are so uncommon, as are all the wonders of nature that we so undervalue. Scholars have not wanted to deal with hallucinations, but whether they are real or not, they are a phenomenon that physiology, physiology should be able to explain. Otherwise, it would run the risk of exposing its incompetence. If someday a scholar were to decide to give not only a definition, but a physiological explanation of this phenomenon, we would still have to see if that theory resolved all the cases, if it omitted the very common occurrence of apparitions of a person's of the moment of death, and if it clarified the coincidence of the person's apparition with his or her death. If this were isolated events, they might be attributed to chance. But since they are quite frequent, chance cannot produce such reoccurrences. If the one who saw the apparition had had the notion that the person was about to die, then fine. However, in most cases, the apparitions involved someone who was not thought about in the least. Consequently, imagination has nothing to do with it. Still, less can still less can the knowledge about the completely unknown circumstances of death be explained away by imagination. The adherents of the hallucination theory will state that the soul, if in fact they believe in a soul, undergoes moments of overexcitation in which the faculties are heightened. We would agree, but when in which the sorry, what is he saying here? We would agree, but when what the soul sees is real, it cannot be treated as an illusion. If in this heightened, excited state, the soul sees something that is not present, it is because it goes to where that something actually is. And if our soul can go to a person who is not present, then why couldn't the soul of the absent person come to us just as easily? Let those who adhere to the hallucination theory take such facts into consideration and not forget that a theory that is contradicted by the facts is necessarily erroneous or incomplete. While we await their explanation, we shall try to provide some ideas of our own on the matter. Here we go. The facts prove that there are true apparitions which Spiritist theory explains perfectly, and which can only be denied by those who accept nothing beyond the physical organism. However, apart from these real visions, aren't there also hallucinations in the normal sense of the word? We can't doubt it, but what is their cause? The spirits themselves have sent us in the right direction, and they have given us a complete explanation in their responses to the following questions. Question: are sightings of apparitions always real, or are they sometimes an effect of hallucination? When we see the devil, for example, or the fantastic things while dreaming, or in some other way, and which we know cannot possibly exist, isn't it due to nothing more than imagination? Yes, sometimes. And when someone is affected by reading certain materials or by stories of witchcraft, and then recalls them and believes he or she is seeing what does not in fact exist. However, we also have already stated that a spirit, by means of its semi material envelope, can take on all sorts of shapes in order to manifest itself. And thus, a mocking spirit can appear with horns and claws, and if it wants to, in order to mock the gullible, just as a good spirit may show itself with wings and a shiny appearance. Question number two. May we regard as apparitions the faces and other images that often appear when we are half asleep or when we simply have our eyes closed? When the senses go numb, the spirit frees itself and can see close or far away what it would not be able to see with the eyes. These images are almost always visions, but they can also be the effect of impressions that the sight of certain objects have left on the brain, which retains their outline just as it retains sounds. The freed spirit then sees in its own mind the impressions fixed therein like a photographic plate. The variety and mixture of such impressions from bizarre and fleeting combinations that almost always immediately disappear despite every effort made to retain them. These fantastic apparitions should be attributed to a similar cause, and they have nothing real about them. They are often produced during illness. It is an accepted fact that the memory is the result of the impressions retained by the brain. But by that strange phenomenon, it is that these impressions, so varied and numerous, are not to be confused with one another. That is an impenetrable mystery, but it is no more strange than the sound waves that crisscross through the air, but which retain their own distinctness. In a sound and well organized brain, these impressions are clear and precise. In a less favorable state, they are diluted and become confused, hence the reason for the loss of reconciliation or the confusion of ideas. This seems less strange if one accepts, as in phrenology, a special destination for each part or even for each fiber of the brain. The images transmitted to the brain by the eyes leave their impressions on it, which enables one to remember a picture as if it were still present. Although this should always be regarded as an act of the memory, since nothing is in fact seen, moreover, in the state of emancipation, the soul can see the brain and find those images in it, especially those that have impressed it the most according to the nature of the spirit's preoccupations or its inner dispositions. Listen to that closely, because when spirits are trying to speak to you via dream or vision, they're not going to do so in a language that you don't understand. They're going to go into your brain, they're going to utilize all of the symbols, all of the memories, all of the sounds, all of the experiences to compile a vision that they then transmit to you so that you can understand it. And when you have a spiritually, hygienically elevated body, you're able to then interpret those messages clearly. That is how it recalls the impressions of religious, diabolical, dramatic, or mundane scenes, as well as bizarre animal like figures that it had seen sometime before in a painting or had heard about in a story, because these also leave their impressions. Thus, the soul really sees, but only sees, a photographic image in the brain. In the normal state, these images are fleeting because all sections of the brain are functioning freely. During an illness, however, the brain is weaker and the normal equilibrium in the parts of the brain disappears. Only some of the parts remain active while others are more or less paralyzed. This results in the permanence of certain images that are not erased as they would be in a normal state regarding external affairs. This is a true hallucination and the main cause of the idée fixe. One can see that we have explained this anomaly with a well-known physiological law that all cerebral impressions, but it also always necessary to take the soul's intervention into consideration. If the materialists have not yet been able to give a satisfactory solution for the phenomenon, it is because they have not wanted to believe in the soul. Thus, they will say that our explanation is erroneous because it is supported by a contested principle. Contested by whom? By them. However, it has been accepted by the great majority since humankind has existed on the earth. The denial by a few does not comprise a law. Has our explanation been satisfactory? We have provided it for what it is worth in the absence of some other, and, if you wish, we might call it a simple hypothesis while awaiting some better. As it is, can it explain all the cases involving visions? Certainly not, but we challenge all physiologists to present one that, according to their exclusivist opinions, can explain all of them. However, when they prefer their sacramental words of overexcitation and heightened imagination, they actually pronounce nothing at all. So, if all the theories about hallucination are insufficient for explaining all the facts, it is because there is something more involved than hallucinations per se. Our theory would be incorrect if we applied it to all cases involving visions. However, because some would contradict it, it is correct insofar as it is applied only to certain effects. So that is the end of chapter 6. The next chapter, chapter 7, we're going to be talking about bicorporality and transfiguration. The subcategories are apparitions of spirits of the living, spirit doubles, for example, Saint Alfonso of Liguori and Saint Anthony of Padua, the Vespasian, transfiguration, and invisibility. Ugh, that is going to be a mouthful. Anyway, do we have any questions? Let me see what we got going on here. Let's see. I've seen things when asleep, and I'll semi wake up enough to relay the info to my husband, who later sees them when awake. Ooh, that's interesting. So he kind of partakes in these visions once he's aware that the opportunity is there. Very cool. So now is your opportunity to ask any questions you guys might have about what we just read or spirits in general, or any other parts of the spirits book or the mediums book from Allan Kardec. I've seen balls of light floating. Okay, so like orbs. Okay, very common, as we talked about in the book. Spirits, and again, a lot of that is dependent upon your faculty, right? So if you were to put 6 mediums in a room, and a spirit wanted to manifest itself, depending on the faculties of each medium, one medium might just see a little flash of light. Another medium might see some kind of a wispy like thing. Another medium might see an actual figure that's very detailed and like eyes and like a mouth and stuff like that. So it depends on the faculties of that medium. That is not to say that one medium is better than the other. That's simply to say that their spiritual development might be more acute. All right. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I will try my best to do another live soon, and we'll continue on with chapter 7. I hope everyone has a wonderful Tuesday night. Be sure to check the replay on YouTube by tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And have a great night. This is how we grow.